Hello and welcome to Bastionland Broadcasting, where tonight we are going back to something that I thought I had solved, which is GMs having problems running the game. We did this 6 months ago where I looked at some of the most sort of highly upvoted problems on Reddit for Ask Game Masters. And I just wanted to see if we could to be honest, it's kind of a two-pronged approach really here. First of all, obviously, it's kind of interesting to look at these problems and think about how I would solve them myself. Obviously, the caveat is this isn't a universal solution, but it's kind of a fun little exercise to think about. But also, I think it's interesting to be aware of what kind of problems GMs at large are facing in their games, because not everyone plays the same games, not everyone plays the same way. So the problems that people face are all very different depending on those things. So it's always interesting to see what's happening out there in the wider population outside of our own little niches. We've already had the first obvious solution in the chat. The biggest problem is that they aren't running Electric Bastionland or Into the Yard. Well, nobody's perfect. We are here on Reddit, and we have, like I say, I've gone through like the highest voted, the top threads from the last month, and I just picked out I think I may have picked 13 by accident, which is very foreboding. Yeah, okay, we've got 13 different threads that we're going to try and work through. And yeah, the thing that I noticed from glancing through at them is obviously it's very, very much weighted towards D&D, which is to be expected. So brace yourselves for that. But it is interesting seeing the kind of the problems that people are facing, and the ones that I haven't come across are almost more interesting than the ones that are problems that I have actual experience with myself. So we're going to start with, this is a weirdly specific one. Deep Dragon, AITA. Am I the asshole, I believe, is the Reddit parlance. Hey, party people, I'm not going to read the whole post, but I have an OP party of 6 level 12 adventurers who are 6 level 12 adventurers, okay? Who are about to encounter an ancient deep dragon. Specifically, they're going to sleep in the deep dragon's regional area for the first time this next session. The deep dragon has the restless sleep regional effect, which makes it so creatures can't reduce their level of exhaustion without a con save when they sleep. So that's cool. I don't know the deep dragon creature. I'm assuming this is a 5th edition thing. But I do like monsters that have that kind of environmental effect. Fire on the Velvet Horizon is kind of the pinnacle for this. A lot of those monsters have very kind of monstrous effects on their environment. And yeah, the idea that people can't sleep within its local area is pretty cool. So I posit that means a failed con save adds a level of exhaustion. I've already set the stage for this. They're running supplies to a strategic hold at which everyone is inexplicably exhausted. They've seen this firsthand, so I feel like they should be aware that sleep doesn't work the same. I'm also going to make the DC 13 instead of 10 because F them. I'm so glad I don't deal with target numbers and setting difficulty classes, because it's just every time I see it now, it's like, you don't have to do this. There's other ways. So it sounds to me like the problem here is they want to do something really quite harsh to their players. Or not so much harsh, but that they want a monster's environmental effect to have a big impact on the players. But they're concerned that it's going to be too much. And I don't know how levels of exhaustion work in D&D 5th edition. I think they're relatively minor. I don't think they cause dramatic effects. But, if I was imagining this was Into the Odd or Electric Bastion, and then I was using the deprived rule, let's say. I think it's good that they can't rest in this entire area. It makes it an interesting. It makes it feel really monstrous that if you try and sleep in this place, you'll just have nightmares, and the garrison that are stationed there are having this problem as well. It's a good kind of way of like heralding the monster's presence before you kind of encounter them. And I'm a big fan of that with big like these tentpole monsters that are kind of take a place at the center of part of the world. It's good if you kind of feel their presence in the world. In this case, kind of literally, even before you've encountered them. So am I the asshole? No, you're fine. I guess they're concerned that perhaps they're increasing the powers of this monster, or they might be reading it in a way that makes the monster more powerful than perhaps it is as written. But I think once you're getting up to high levels anyway, I think it's fine to do things like this. Give the monster a little boost. Yeah. Easy. Malarkey informs me that 1 level of exhaustion is disadvantage on all skill checks. And then I'm guessing it just gets worse from there. Oh, for 5th edition, that's a lot apparently. Yeah, okay. Well, I still stand by it. I think it's good but then again, I'm coming at this with the assumption that this deep dragon probably isn't something they can just fight fair and square. They have to kind of plan and outsmart it a bit. Is there anything more burnout inducing than trying to help an unpleasable player character out of the character choices they regret? So my party has a player who's constantly hating on their own class and build. There's the word. When I say build, I know that this is going to be a tough one for me to comment on. They say they want the proficiencies of a rogue and the spontaneous casting of a sorcerer or bard. Should be a slam dunk, right? After about a year of play, apparently it's not. Being a musician on the battlefield is too silly. So they're saying they're unhappy with their character, and it sounds like everything that this DM is suggesting, they say no, there's a reason why they don't want that. And they try offering them other options. So it's no. So I eventually just told them to find several homebrew classes so that I could see if any of them weren't OP as shit, and that is the only recourse after their apparent complete lack of ability to work with even a reflavouring with mechanical shifts. We've reworked this character no less than 4 times. So I will admit here, this is outside of my wheelhouse, because the idea of being so invested in the sort of mechanics of your character that you would rework it this many times suggests that it's a different style of game than what I'm sort of comfortable playing. But the problem I'm seeing here is that the player has a problem that they're not happy with something in the game, and no matter what the GM suggests, the player says no. And it's that old thing of, you can lead a horse to water, but the horse you can't make the horse drink. Is the player just one of these people that's going to slightly complain about the class that they've got regardless? I would say the GM is not the babysitter. And I'm not saying that in a way that's trying to be like, these you need to be horrible to your players. But I want it as more of like a shared adult relationship. And if the player wants to rework their character, then they can go and, they can do it. But it's not my job to make sure that you are happy with your character. It is not my responsibility to do that. I feel like it's good practice to help to a certain degree. But if you're getting bogged down to this level where you're having to make so many suggestions and they're saying no, then you can say, well, okay, you do you with your character. Solved. I was going to say, if there's any that come up in the chat, I am happy to expand this from the 13. I feel more uncomfortable giving advice to actual people that are here rather than these anonymous Reddit people I'm punching onto. But Pone Monkey says, do you have any tips for a GM who wants to play a different type of game than the players? Is there some kind of compromise to be made? In this situation, so as an example, let's imagine that you have one player that really wants to play something like, I don't know, Rissus or something super light, super kind of narrative-y, and then you want the rest of the group want to play like Pathfinder. I feel like you're not going to please the group by compromising on something that sits in the middle. I think it's fine for the person that's running the game to say, so if the GM is saying, and they want to run a different type of game, it's fine for the GM to say, okay, I'm running a game, I'm going to run Pathfinder. And the players can choose to play or not play. Now, the caveat is I am in a luxurious position where I have several game meetup groups near the city that I'm in. So if some players don't want to play with me, it doesn't limit my options. If you are much more limited in your options, I realise you've got to be a bit more pragmatic about it, and perhaps you do have to compromise. But I would say in that case, I would still rather play like a short campaign of Rissus or whatever, and then a short campaign of Pathfinder. I think going for the middle option can sometimes just leave everyone equally dissatisfied, in my experience. Advice on sea events in a realistic campaign. So I'm running a campaign that's kind of realistic. Magic is there, but it's rare and hidden. A player of mine is travelling for ages on a ship, and I've run out of ideas to make this travel bearable and not incredibly boring. I roamed this subreddit searching for ideas, and indeed I found some very nice posts, D100 sea travel events, but as you can imagine, most of the hooks are related to classic fantasy encounters, merfolk, dragon turtles, etc. So when you're going for like a realistic setting, they're saying that it's either pirates, weather, or things like issues with the crew. What else can you do? Now, even aside from whether or not this is a realistic campaign, this is interesting because I've been thinking and writing a lot about sci-fi games at the moment. So from reading about Traveller and from running Cosmic Highway, and I'm really interested by the idea of a game that has lots of these journeys and lots of travel, but it can sometimes feel like travel either boils down to making a few random encounter checks, or you just sort of describe a bit of scenery and then you say, okay, then 3 days later you arrived. And instead, when I think about the journeys in games that have been really interesting for me, it's much more, I like the kind of road trip approach, which is if they're trying to get to somewhere and you want the journey to be significant, give them various route options and make sure that each route has a number of stops that they're going to have to stop along the way. They can't just say, yeah, we keep walking, and then we'll camp, and then we'll keep walking. With a sort of, listen, I'm not going to pretend to understand how running a crew on a sailing ship works, but let's say, for instance, that the ship can only hold enough sort of supplies so that it will have to stop multiple times on the journey, and then you have to choose where are you going to plan your stops. And then it becomes this kind of like this road trip idea of like, we're not just going straight to the destination, we're having to stop at these places, solve a little mini problem when we get there of getting more supplies. Perhaps there's problems happening at that destination, at the stop, and you can kind of build tension for arriving at the destination as well by, if we're talking about this, going back to this dragon situation they had, show the kind of signs of like the dragon being nearby and so on. Yeah, and there's talk about resource management. Like, resource management is fine. I'm not gonna like flip the table if someone suggests we do some resource management, but it's not like my go-to idea of like what I enjoy in a game. But yeah, I would make it so that the journey has to be broken up by a number of stops. That's my kind of quick fix for journeys. I mean, the mapping system in Electric Bastion Land for Deep Country is kind of built around that idea. Like, if you have 2 points, there's nodes to get there, and you can follow a different route, or you can even go off the route. So yeah, fill the journey with stuff before you're even thinking about random events, would be my advice. How to handle players that just seem to be just killing time. So players in one of my groups seem to be avoidant of things that would further the plot, or even doing things that would make them stronger via side quests. They spent the last few sessions visiting all of the businesses in town, chatting up the owners and spending time helping them fix things or make things. We're sort of in the middle of the campaign, not close to the start or the end, and the next task at hand is likely a side quest aimed at one player in particular. Everyone likes and has expressed that they can't wait to help. It's like the equivalent of the friend who just wants to spend all day on the couch or on social media. Nothing is gained, and I'm leaving the sessions with a sense of loss. Building on this, they aren't really the type of group to ask questions related to the task at hand. What do we need to do next? How are we going to do it? What information tools do we need, etc.? Feels like we're approaching playing the Sims TTRPG. Any suggestions would be excellent. So this is something that I've seen quite a lot, and it's something I recognise from like when I especially have played with new players, like players that are new to RPGs, or even like when I first got into RPGs myself. You know, there's the classic story, which is often like a bit of a RPG horror story of, you know, a bunch of teenagers get together to play D&D, and they spend the whole time in the tavern making stupid jokes and doing stupid things. And if you get past the kind of the slightly like juvenile approach to that is quite a kind of natural drive when you approach this kind of game that has tactical infinity. It's easy to think of tactical infinity as being just related to like combat and problem solving, but just being able to like mess around in the world in a way that you can't with a video game. People do like to really indulge in that, and it's fine to do that. Like, I don't think it's a problem. I think when you've got a situation where it's happening for multiple weeks and it doesn't feel like anything's moving forward, I think the issue isn't necessarily so much with the players there, because players will have different levels of like self drive. Some players will fully embrace the idea that their characters have objectives and they need to pursue them. Some players will kind of want to be more reactive and like, well, we're waiting for something to happen. So you need to have a world that's going to push them, and you need to have a world that's going to change if they do nothing. So a classic example of this is something like Apocalypse World has its fronts. Blades in the Dark has, I think they're like plots. It's like a countdown clock anyway. You need to have things that are ticking away in the background, and if the players do nothing, these things are going to change in a way that actually affects the player characters and actually makes the players stand up and take notes. And it doesn't have to be like the town that they love spending time in gets like blown up. You can be more subtle than that, probably. But you know, that is that is there to fall back on. Yeah, so you've got to make the world dynamic. That's the thing. If you make the world like the world of The Sims, then don't be surprised when your players start playing it that way. And I should say, I'm giving GM advice today. I think it's good player advice to take responsibility for that as well, and start thinking about, well, what can I do to make this individual session fun for everyone, but also what can I be doing to make this campaign fun for everyone, and make it so that at the end of the campaign we can look back on it and feel a sense of satisfaction. So yeah, but I'm concentrating on the GM side of things today, but don't think that I'm saying the players are there to just do whatever they want. I think everyone has a kind of shared responsibility to make the game fun for each other, but I don't think it falls just on one person. Oh, I saw this one and I was like, this is going to get me going. Elad Hen says, what's wrong with playing The Sims? Exactly. Like, if that's what some players want to do. They want to do things that they can't necessarily do in a video game. And like, I know you can play The Sims, but if you do that in an RPG, you've got so many more options. So I think it's fine to embrace that, but it needs to feel like it's going somewhere. So if they want to do that, then lean into it and have that matter across the course of the campaign. Don't just have it be like a side activity. Like, make it matter. That's the main thing. It's probably going to tie into what I'm saying here about consequences. I got a feeling I'm going to be harping on about information, choice, and impact again. But here we go. I'm going to get ready for this one. I'm running a D&D 5th edition Eberron campaign, and I have a bit of a dilemma. In our session 0, we agreed we wanted a grittier world with consequences, but it threatens to derail what I thought of as the main plot. Alarm bells are going off immediately. I gave our warlock a coiling grasp tattoo from his patron. At the same time, said player wanted to bring fictional NPCs into town who have a complicated past with this warlock. Long story short, I bring one of these characters into a role-playing scene since he clearly wants to explore these relationships, and the warlock attacks the NPC unprovoked in front of townspeople. The warlock is from a different nation, and I think the logical conclusion is to have them extradited to said nation, or extracted to said nation, since the NPC in question is a diplomat from there. So the player character has killed a diplomat in front of a load of witnesses unprovoked. However, this storyline drastically derails the plot and puts the focus on the warlock, who is already a screen hog. At the same time, I don't want the players to think their actions have no consequences, or have to suspend disbelief that the world isn't reacting to them normally. For what it's worth, the characters all seem interested in the main plot, and I'm certainly more interested in that than this extradition idea. What would you do? So I don't need to go on again about the idea that I don't like to say that you should or shouldn't do things in when you're running a game. Like, you can run the game however you want, and as long as you're not doing awful things to your players, you can run the game however you want. But I feel like even if you want something that's a bit more like Critical Role-y, where you know you're going to have a plot that you're working through, and it's a roller coaster ride that the players are happy to sort of go through, I still feel like you should keep some flexibility around your main plot. Now, I would just say don't have a main plot. Just make a world, make a load of threats and things, make a load of sparks that might blow up at any moment, create a load of interesting places, interesting people, and shove the characters into it, and that's the plot. So if this were my game, the fact that the one character has ignited one of these powder kegs by killing an innocent person in front of everyone, it will create an interesting situation where the players are going to be... I wouldn't have them get immediately arrested. I'd give them... I would create a situation where perhaps they have the choice to turn themselves in or be exiled from this place, and then they can still address your main threat. So I don't know what the main plot is here, but let's say the main plot is your classic, there's a big baddie that needs stopping. You can still do that, but perhaps now you're not going to be able to rely on the support of this town, or you're actually going to have people from this town actively coming to search for you, and the person that you killed, their allies are going to be searching for you as well. So you just made yourself a whole load of enemies. I see what he means, though, about if one player does something that might thrust them into the spotlight, it might feel like you're being unfair to the other players. But I think the key thing is you kind of need to... If something like this happens, I think it needs to affect the whole party. There are groups that sort of have party members that go off and do their own thing. I know it's a huge cliche of don't split the party, and I think you can do it in certain situations, but I don't think you should split the party on this kind of large overworld scale where you're doing a end of Fellowship of the Ring situation where characters are going off on different journeys themselves. No. It's better if everyone stays together. So I think you could still have the consequences applied without throwing out all of the prep that you've done. And do most players want consequences? I can only speak for myself. I feel like if players ever get the sense that there are no consequences, they will start to lose interest. Again, I can only really speak from my own perspective, but I've played games before where it feels like whatever you do, you kind of end up in the same place. And as soon as one of those little moments happens, I just kind of like switch off. And I'm like, oh, okay, well. Because the key, everything in my experience in like a tabletop RPG, like the whole experience boils down to, for me, it all boils down to one thing, which is when the GM says, what do you do? And the whole point of this type of game is that you can then do anything, and the thing that you will do will matter. It's not enough to just say you can do anything, because some games I've been in, you can do anything, but it doesn't really matter because you're going to end up in the same place. Instead, the best games that I've played in are games where you can do anything and you could end up anywhere. And you can look back at the end of the game and say, my decisions have led to the way that this story has worked out. So there we go. That's my rant on that one. We're making good progress. Good progress, sorry. How do you mitigate the effects of having a GM PC? Please don't just say don't. I'm not like I've never been in a game that had like a really bad GM PC. In fact, can't think when I've been in a game that someone else has run where they've had like a GM PC, where they've had like a character that came along for the journey. I feel like if everyone is just, I don't know how to say this tactfully, I feel like if no one's being shitty, then it should be fine. Like, that's the thing. There's always talk about like, oh, the GMPC is going to steal the spotlight from the players. I don't think that's. I think to go back to the previous issue that we talked about consequences. I think as long as they don't steal control from the players, that's the thing. If you've got a GMPC that's like calling the shots, and the GM says, "Okay, here's the situation. Now, what do you do?" Oh, but before you do that, my wizard that's following you around says we should go this way because that's the right way. That would be a problem. But having like a powerful ally with you, I don't think it's like that bad. Maybe I'm just like glad to have someone else doing the work. So anyway, let's read the actual problem instead of just imagining my own issue. I run a West Marches server, and I have a PC for when another player runs. We don't always have another player GMing when I'm available, so I tend to end up being the GM. My plan right now is to make some scenario-generated documents and maybe do GM hot potato with a couple of players. The other idea I have is that I'd give the NPCs AI in the form of combat, which target to focus on, etc. Social, multiple reactions for either the player failing or succeeding a roll. I've completely lost what's going on here. So let me start again. So this person, they have a character for when they can actually play, but they often end up GMing instead. So the plan is to rotate the GMing role, which is good. Or the other idea is to give I'm assuming this means their player character. They'd like create an AI for their player character. I don't know. Again, this whole combat, which target to focus on, this feels like so far from my own things that I would be thinking about that I find it hard to like. And this isn't a comment on this person. This is a comment on how we can have very different frames of reference. But like, if I'm not at the table, I don't care like what happens with my character in combat. I think if the player is not, oh, I see. So that they're still going to be there, but they want the player character to kind of act impartially with an AI, so that their character that they play in other games will be present, but they will act through a kind of algorithm. That is overthinking the problem, I would say. I think you have two very simple ways to deal with this problem. Number one, you have the GM the character goes along for the ride, and the GM says what they do in like combat situations and stuff, but they deliberately take a back seat when it comes to like decisions, and they kind of go along with it. And, you know, they're there so that, you know, they're still on the adventure, but they're in a bit more of a supporting role. Alternatively, you have, while you're running the game, your character is off doing something else. And then when you're returning as a player, that character shows up again and you can play them. And that is just so much simpler, and just do that. Like, if I'm not playing my character, just like put them out of the way. Like, just why are they there? But I'm, you know, again, I'm not like running games that would like really suffer if one character wasn't there that week, because, you know, there's plenty of other players. We have the famous Sam Dobler in the chat. Fans, please control yourself. Yeah, so Sam's saying about how if the GNPC is too useful, it draws away from players. But I don't know. I feel like as long as they're useful in a different way, and I feel like as long as they have some kind of limitation. Like, the classic example is like that there's some like badass wizard like Gandalf that's like with the party, and the wizard is just solving all the problems. I think if you had like an ally with you who you knew had like some really powerful spells, but they were very limited, and like they could only cast 3 spells for the whole day, but you know that you can like call on them to help. I feel like that then puts the decisions in your hands, and the extra player is kind of more like, so the extra character is kind of more like an additional resource rather than like this weird half player thing. Maxwell Patton asks, totally not related, feel free to ignore. Okay, cool. No, I will answer it. Can you recommend any published adventures to run with Into the Odd? I'm not going to dwell on this because I will derail the entire stream. But there are a couple of adventures that I've put out. If you go to my itch page, which I can't remember the address of, but if you search for Prison of the Worm Queen is the one that I wrote that was kind of designed as a bit of an intro adventure for Electric Bastionland. Oh, you said Into the Odd. Sorry, not Electric Bastion. I mean, it will still work. It's more Electric Bastionland in flavour. But for Into the Odd, Deep Carbon Observatory is one that I've done myself, and I've heard other people had good luck with. Fever Swamp by Luke Gearing is very good and very sort of straightforward to convert, kind of on the fly. Anything that doesn't rely too much on like D&D specifics of like, I've tried to like run the Tomb of Horrors with Into the Odd, but there's so many like stupid specific references to like a D&D spell. Thank you, Foyer Strassen, for linking to my itch page that I forgot. So yeah, anything that kind of like is anything that doesn't rely too much on like D&D tropes, I think is quite straightforward to run. But Deep Carbon Observatory or Fever Swamp are both great picks. Thinking of adding a metagame lifeline. Want advice? I've been thinking that when I run my campaign, I want to make sure I don't punish people for staying in character and doing things that might affect them negatively on some level. Alarm bells. Alarm bells are going. I have been debating having an option that once or twice in the campaign, the player can use a get out of jail free card before they roll to keep themselves from getting horribly screwed over, provided that the thing that is happening is because they chose to do it in character. For instance, a thief does not see guards and tries to pick a house door. Out of character, he knows that guard is likely to see him and he will use a lifeline. Then, should they fail a stealth roll, I will have them get found by the guards in broad daylight. Only they tell him that the house... What? They tell him that the house the owner is locked out of is down the street. The idea I want to bring is to the table that don't have to worry about negative consequences. So they want the character to be able to do things that the player wouldn't want to do, but the character would want to do. And their solution to this is to give them like a token that they can spend to say, I'm going to do this thing because it's in character, but I'm not going to suffer any negative consequences for it. I can see the appeal. And I don't think it's terrible. I think it could work absolutely fine, but I feel like it is slightly missing. I feel like it's taking away more than it's bringing, because yes, the thief technically does try and pick the lock of the thief is trying to break into a house in broad daylight, but they're not suffering any consequences for it. So we're getting information, we're getting choice, but we're not getting consequences. I don't dislike this like loads, but I think I would rather just... I feel like players would just do this anyway. Like, players, in my experience, they don't need encouragement to do like potentially stupid things because it's in character. And it will depend vastly on the players. Some people really get into this idea of like, oh, well, this is what my character would do, so I must do it. Whereas some players are very much like, I'm a little bit more like, well, no, I'm just going to do the thing that my character is a bit more like an avatar, and it's more about my decision making. So I think if you've got a mix of players, you don't need to worry about this too much. And I feel like adding a meta currency to like soften the consequences of acting in character is just going to create like weird situations, I think. I feel like it's kind of slightly fixing a problem that doesn't exist, is the category that I would slot this into. What do you actually prepare when preparing a game? I've never played a TTRPG before, but I want to try it out by attempting to DM a one-shot for my friends who have also never tried one. I'm planning on using Honey Heist as a rule set, since it seems simple enough for me and everyone to understand, while probably keeping all the generalities of what makes people like these. I have an okay general idea of what a story is going to be, but I don't feel prepared or know what to do to prepare myself. Should I create the characters so it's easier for them to get into the role-playing? If they're going to be in some dungeony places, how much of it should be made beforehand? How much of it should be improvised? I know so little about this that I don't even know what questions to ask. I guess the main deal would be that no matter how much I think about it, it doesn't actually make me feel like I'm working towards having something. Do I write this down on a Word document? Is there some template to follow? Okay, so this person is like overwhelmed by preparing for their first game. Interestingly, I would love to hear how a group that is entirely new people, like a new GM and new players, gets on with something like Honey Heist, because Honey Heist is really fun. I've actually never played it, but I've heard so many good things. I've read it. I did a collaboration with Grant last year that was kind of in a similar vein, that one-page RPG thing, and I like it a lot. But I feel like I could play a fun game of it with if someone was running it who's ran RPGs before. But I feel like a brand new GM playing something so light and so open, it could kind of be overwhelming. But in terms of what a new player should prep for the game, I think when you're running your first game, I would probably prep slightly more. Well, no, I'll tell you what I would prep. I would create a bit more of a structure for your game so that you've got a little bit more to fall back on if things kind of stall and you aren't experienced enough yet to like work out how to move things forward. So I would have the classic structure that I would use if it was my first game ever that I was running is having so in this case, the bears, player characters, have them be trapped somewhere. So it's the D&D thing, like you wake up in a cell. But have these bears wake up somewhere and they have to escape from this place. So they have a very straightforward goal. And then fill the place with dangerous and interesting obstacles. So you draw a map, lots of different routes, and little bits of description you can put in. Like, I'm not saying create box text, but if it's your first game, you might benefit from like a little prompt, like a nice little sentence describing the location. And then as you get more experienced, I would replace those things with more just like prompts, random tables, when you get more comfortable just like making stuff up with a few prompts. The best advice I heard recently about how to prepare for a game, I can't remember who it was. Despite everything I say about Twitter, I think this may have been a Twitter thing, but somebody said, if you've got an hour to prep for your game, you could sit down and spend an hour writing stuff down, but you might be just as well spending that hour just like thinking of cool stuff. Like maybe not even drawing a map or anything, just like think of cool things that fit the situation. So if you're running a sci-fi game, and it's like, let's say you're running Cosmic Highway, so you're thinking of like space truckers, just think of some cool space trucker characters, think of some cool space trucker situations, think of some cool ways to describe a bit of space. Just little kind of fragments that don't fit together yet. Just think of them, and you don't even need to write them down because they might come back into your head at the table. Now, this is quite an extreme approach. I think there's probably a middle ground, but basically, don't feel like your prep has to be always like sat writing stuff and creating this, creating a huge notepad full of the campaign. Like you can just think of cool things, read cool things for inspiration, and just kind of get those fragments in your head. Antagonists and challenges are kind of the key, aren't they? Like you want to have things that are going to challenge your players. The worst thing they can have is they're wandering around a place and they're like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like we're just looking around. Give them a very straightforward goal and lots of things that are in their way. Oh, I'd forgotten that I clicked on this. Need help crafting a riddle. Hey all, I'm looking for a hand. Okay, I mean you've probably all seen the answer. I'm not going to do a riddle stream. I've said that. I do get pretty desperate for these stream formats on some days. The day that I do a stream of riddles, you can call me done completely. I'm looking for a hand crafting a riddle that matches the riddle below. Players need to fill in a 5-letter word. When you start, I'm beneath you. Remove a letter, I'm above you. Remove another letter, and I'm all around you. And the answer is chair. Remove a letter, you get hair. Remove another letter, you get air. I'm looking for another 5-letter word that works in the same way. Look, I don't know. I'm torn because I'm annoyed at myself because if I was at a table playing D&D or a D&D like RPG and one of the problems was a riddle, I would at the surface level I would be disgusted because I would say, why are you doing a riddle? They're terrible elements to put in your dungeon. Like, no, they're just rubbish. They're tacky. They are just like, they're not interesting because you either get it or you don't. But deep down, I would really want to solve the riddle, and I would feel like an absolute genius when I solve the riddle. So I can go I've kind of gone full circle on this, where I know riddles are bad, but I know that I'm the kind of dork that would secretly enjoy solving a riddle. However, the key is, so I keep going back to like Lord of the Rings analogies and like Fellowship of the Rings analogies, but like the classic is like Gandalf gets to the door to Moria, and there's like it's not a riddle, but there's like I guess it is a riddle. He has to say like, speak friend and enter, and he spends ages trying to do it, and then someone solves it, and the door opens, and the adventure can continue. That's terrible in like a game, because if you get there and they're stuck, it's no good. However, having the riddle be like some little sidetrack or a shortcut, or it's on something they can take with them. So maybe it's on like a small chest, and they can take it with them. And perhaps it's not even a riddle they could solve themselves, so they have to go and ask other characters about this riddle on this chest. I think then it can be fine if it's like a bonus rather than some. I know I'm not talking about like the main plot line here, but I think if it's blocking off too much access to too much of the fun stuff in this location, then I think get rid of it. But if it's just holding back a little bit of a bonus or an extra route, then I will allow it. Yeah, exactly. We're all on the same wavelength. Yeah, it should be a little extra thing, and it should be difficult as well. That's my other like clue. My other thing is like if it's just an easy riddle, it feels like it's a no-brainer. Like if it's what the one about. I can't even think of like a really obvious one. There's one about like a river or something. Like I have a bed, but not a. I don't know. It should be like a difficult one that you have to. It should be something you can be thinking over while you go the other way, and then you might get it, and then you go back and open the door. Just use Wordle, yeah. There's a gap in the mark. I mean, now is the time to strike with your D&D Wordle content, like a giant book of D&D themed Wordle problems would just like I reckon 2 million on Kickstarter if I were to do that, if I got some nice artwork. So yeah, maybe I'll do that tomorrow. Home-based towns for PCs. Ways to simulate a dynamic changing milieu. About to run a campaign in which the PCs were based in a small fledgling colony on a mysterious, far-flung jungle island. Blah, blah, blah. I'm imagining lots of downtime activities. This is D&D 5th edition. And I'm keen to be able to simulate a sense of the colony being a real place, without too much scripting of events. Yeah. I'd be curious to know if GMs can offer good examples of other kinds of tables or generators for coming up with how things have changed over a given period of time. Whether it be what's for sale, who's feuding with whom, whether there's a major event affecting the whole colony. Yeah, so they've actually kind of solved the problem here, because that's what you need. You need tables that are going to make things feel different whenever you go back. However, remember, don't make it all entirely random, because there should be some random things happening, but also like the things that the player characters are doing should affect the town as well. So if the player characters come back with a load of money and spend it in the town, they should come back and things should have changed. If it were me, what would I do? See, when I've done this in like Electric Bastion before, I have used like I've just created some very straightforward tables. I would probably make them like luck tables nowadays, where you roll a d6 and a 1 means something really bad's happening, like a crisis. 2 to 3 means things are going a bit awry, and 4 to 6 means things are going fine. That like weighted towards things going badly. But I think that's fine. I think, especially if you're doing like a small fledgling colony, like it sounds like it's a pretty dangerous existence. So yeah, use luck tables. I'm not gonna just say using Electric Bastion for everything, but that would solve it. I currently run a campaign that consists of 2 players, a Blood Hunter 10, Artificer 2, and an Eldritch Knight. They reached level 12 around 6 to 7 sessions ago. However, the Blood Hunter is now telling me that they want to actually take back their last level up and change it to Artificer. It's like the same thing we had before about like respecking characters, and I would say just let them do it. Who cares? As long as they go off and do the actual bookwork on it, then fuck it, just let them do it. I told them that while I have been lenient in the past, any sentence that you have to say to another human, where you have to use the phrase, while I have been lenient in the past, unless you're, a literal king, I'm not sure how that's going to sound. So while I have been lenient in the past, this seemed too far. He then said he would just play a new character instead. And then everyone else was upset because it's going to change the campaign. So the other player didn't want to play because they didn't want to play with someone who lashed out when they didn't get their own way. Look, this player is asking me to bend or change the rules for them. Should I concede to them? Does this person think they are like an actual... It's like one of these decisions in Crusader Kings where it's like, am I giving one of my vassals too much independence? Is this going to cause problems later? They're going to rise up against me. Look, just let them respect their character. Like, Who cares? I'm guessing it's going to be the same character, like the same named character. Oh God, their name is actually Alexander the Great. Sorry, I'm not trying to. Yeah. So sorry. Apologies for referring to them as a king when they're clearly an emperor. Yeah, just let them respect their character. Look, I'm not the person to ask about character build advice, but if you're going to have that kind of buildy game, the one thing I have, when I played like video games where you are doing those kind of character builds, which I kind of enjoy sometimes in a video game context, if you can respec quite easily, that's always a nice feature. I never feel like that takes anything away from it. I'm never like, I need the pressure of this being a final set in stone decision. Just let them do it. Yeah. Right, we have 2 problems left in 9 minutes to solve. Guys, I'm a noob DM in the making, and I need possible Deus Ex Machina solution in case the final boss of my one-shot is way too powerful. You don't, but let's carry on. For context, the final encounter is a fight against a nerfed adult silver dragon. Basically, it's a mix between the stats of an adult and young silver dragons. The justification behind this is something that I don't need to know. Okay, blah blah. Now, okay, so they're fighting this dragon. Now, for possible Deus Ex Machinas, I thought the dragon's second in command betraying him because I need to have an inside man working with the party's patron. So, what? The party should be 4 or 5 8-level players with some magic items, and I'm considering giving them a free feat too. So, if they still end up overwhelmed, what do you think I could do to help them in case it all goes tits up? Okay. Don't. Just like make the monster. Make them as powerful as you feel they should be. If it makes sense for the dragon's second in command to betray them, then make that happen. But I would have that happen as a result of player action. So I would give a little clue to the players that this is an option somehow. I would give them information. So I would say, you can do this better than me. But you really heavy-handedly say, look, there's rumours that their second in command has ambitions of their own. And then if the players make the choice to act on it, then they get the impact of convincing their second in command to betray them, and they get to feel like an absolute genius when they go to fight the dragon and this traitor comes in to help them. If they show up for this fight and then they start losing and the second in command automatically turns on them, it feels like you're playing a scripted game to me. Yeah, just it that doesn't feel fun. I mean, the fact that they're actually calling it like a Deus Ex Machina and they're like, this is fine. Like, I feel like this is generally considered a bad thing in games. Or at least it's considered an unsatisfying thing often. So, it's kind of funny that they're still happy to go for it despite using that name. So yeah, don't do it. But if you're going to have a monster that's very powerful, make sure you sort of telegraph some options so that the players have choices for how to engage with this monster. Otherwise, if they feel that the only option they have is to go and fight it, and then they go and fight it and get killed, then that will feel unsatisfying as well. But you've got to make sure information, choice, impact. That's all it is. Finally, are there any rules for dealing with one-on-one duels? I have a player who told me he really wants to duel people one-on-one. I love it when there's no distinction between character and player. I have a player who told me that he really wants his character to duel people one-on-one. I want to support how they want to play, and I don't feel like saying dueling isn't part of the local culture, but I feel like the rules of combat as written would make one-on-one fights boring. They are aimed at group fighting after all. And then they've got this slightly more involved one-on-one combat system that they've suggested, which, that's fine. Any other ideas I might use? I've talked to someone about these ideas and they think they are too fiddly. Yeah, I'd probably agree. It's not player versus player. The PC has a list of people he sees as having wronged him and is looking for them to challenge them to honourable combat. So I think you just have them fight one-on-one using the standard combat rules with a few changes. Number one, you make one way or another, you make sure that the combat is fast. So it could be as simple as, for this duel, everything does double damage. I don't know the numbers in 5th edition, but I get the impression that it's quite grindy and like stacks of hit points. Whereas a duel should feel much more decisive. And the other players don't really want to be sitting and watching a 30-minute combat between one player and an NPC. So use the normal system, but find a way to speed it up. Don't get too bogged down in the details of the fight, because when I think of like duels that have been interesting so I'm thinking about like Game of Thrones or something. There's like various duels in the TV show that are very exciting and interesting, and part of that is because of like, fight choreography and all that. But usually, especially in the earlier series, it's because there's a lot riding on the result. So I would say if they make sure that before they go into the duel, they know that there are real consequences for winning or losing this duel. The obvious thing is that it's to the death, but that's quite drastic. But I kind of like it. So if you know that whenever you go into one of these duels, it's going to be to the death, and if you get knocked down, the NPC will kill the PC. Now that would make it exciting. It would also make it kind of terrifying to some players. Otherwise, it could just be that if you lose, then this character has failed in their quest, basically. So like, what does the character do after this? Because you can't just keep dueling the same person. How else do they reconcile this mission? I can also see rock paper scissors being suggested in the chat, and I know it sounds silly, but something like that I think could be just as, you almost want just a really quick, simple duel system, and then put all of the extra energy that you're saving by not having the combat be super involved, put all that energy into making the stakes really interesting and having the aftermath be really interesting as well. So with that, we have solved all of the problems. Thank you everyone for tuning in. There should be another Bastion and broadcast next week. There's a chance it might be moved, so stay tuned for that. As always, if you wanted to read more about the stuff I'm doing, you can go to bastionland.com. And if you want to support the stream, you can go to patreon.com/bastionland. Thank you everyone in the chat for joining in. It's been a lot of fun. And as always, I'll see you next time. Goodbye for now.